For anyone who's seen some of my earlier videos, the essence of this video is old material, so you don't need to watch anymore. But it's repackaged here for newcomers. So, you found this video, and you've got an interest in the Lucy Letby case, and this video focuses on Cheshire Police Operation Hummingbird. Do you think they followed the rules? Do you think they followed the investigation manual and took full accountability? The SIO took full accountability for every facet of the investigation? Do you think the prosecutor followed the code and the SIO showed a working knowledge of it? And do you think that reasonable inquiries were made as per the police's investigation code to make reasonable inquiries to find evidence, not just to convict, but that points away from a conviction, that exonerates? If you think that, you need to hear these clips, 3 clips with a blank space between them, from Professor Hutton. Thanks to Lucy Letby Analysis channel for these clips. Here's Professor Hutton, the statistician.
So I had an email on the 22nd of March 2018 saying that my name had been given, they'd been searching for somebody, my name had come up for the medico-legal side of things, and that they were investigating a spike in the number of babies collapsing and dying in a neonatal unit at a hospital, and that they collected substantial material, and what they wanted was somebody to help them understand and assess the chances of sheer coincidence. And, possibly with comparisons to other universities. Other hospitals. Yeah. So, I responded and arranged to have a conversation, as well as asking what information was available. And, very early on, I said, the correct approach is very well established, been established since 1980. Of how you investigate these things. And I explained what the correct approach was and what the correct question to ask was, which is, if you have a cluster of events, what are the possible explanations and which is the most likely? That permission. But the other thing I pointed out very early on was you've got to write down a very precise definition of what you mean by unexpected. Or unanticipated or sudden, which I never saw. In fact, I don't think I've yet seen anything in the papers that I've read. There may be in papers I wasn't. And I had a meeting arranged, as the Guardian discovered, to discuss the evidence. And then that meeting was cancelled because the Crown Prosecution Service had been told that this meeting was scheduled to discuss the validity of the statistical evidence in the case. And the prosecutor, I got this email saying the prosecutor does not agree with our line of inquiry and has instructed us not to pursue this avenue any further at present. Now, I didn't know then, and I might not have had time even if I did, that was both a breach of the code for Crown prosecution, instructing the police and not to get evidence. It is also, as far as I understand, criminal act by the Crown Prosecution Service because the police investigation and something bill of 1996 specifically says you cannot tell the police to avoid looking into evidence which might provide evidence of innocence of a person. And yet, of course, that's precisely what this instruction by the Crown Prosecution Service did.
Okay, so The first of three documents to have a quick look at and get straight to the relevant point. It's the Code for Crown Prosecutors, CPS, page 6. Section 3.3. Prosecutors cannot direct the police or other investigators. Next, Major Crime Investigation Manual, page 15. Roles and responsibilities. This is under section 1.3. 1.3.1. Senior Investigating Officer, SIO. They are accountable for every facet of the enquiry. Accountable for every facet of the enquiry. The final document, Criminal Procedure and Investigations Act 1996, Code of Practice, page 9. In conducting an investigation, the investigator should pursue all reasonable lines of inquiry, whether these point towards or away from the suspect. What is reasonable in each case will depend on the particular circumstances. It is a matter for the investigator, with the assistance of the prosecutor if required, to decide what constitutes a reasonable line of inquiry in each case. That's section 3.5 of the Code of Practice. So I've just shown you what the two codes of practice say, the one for the prosecution and the one for the police, and the investigation manual for the police. So, what's clear? Well, from Professor Hutton's interview, the prosecutor had no business directing the police, and the police should have known better. The SIO should have known better than to be directed. He's accountable for the investigation, as per the instruction manual. But here's the big enchilada. The Code of Practice for Investigators makes it an obligation to find evidence that points towards or away from a suspect. So this dropping Hutton before the statistics are done, and remember, she wanted an objective definition of a crash or unexpected event. An objective one that she could incorporate into her statistical analysis. Well, is it too cynical to say that flies in the face of the Texas sharpshooter approach to identifying what is and isn't suspicious? Has Cheshire Police released the objective definition they used to identify suspicious cases? Quite frankly, I haven't heard of it, and they seem to be lacking a bit of transparency, objectivity and openness. So, the big enchilada, that obligation to find that evidence, the likelihood that Hutton would produce from her statistical analysis is that either pointed away or towards a suspect. I think it's quite high. You don't have to be a rocket science to realise that. So, there's a clear failure, and that's the big one. Is anyone else considering the possibility that this, at the direction of the prosecution, we dropped Hutton, is a bit of a fig leaf to try and provide some cover from the duty in the code of practice to find evidence that might exonerate. It appears that way. Thanks for your time. I've kept it brief. Have a good day.